Thank you all for coming. I'm President Jermaine Sullivan from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In my ecclesiastical role, I have oversight of 9 congregations in Atlanta, Georgia. Today, my wife, Kimbe, and I are honored to be at the California African American Museum to conduct this press conference for what we know will be a memorable day for African American family history research. Today, we also hold in memory our brothers and sisters in Charleston, South Carolina, as we stand in solidarity to mourn with those who mourn the loss of innocent lives due to recent senseless acts of violence. We hope today's announcements can in some way bring bright hope and healing.
This is also the 150th anniversary of Juneteenth, or Emancipation Day, and is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. From its Galveston, Texas origin in 1865, the observance of June 19th has become a national holiday. It is a time for family, reflection, self-improvement, rejoicing, and planning for the future. As you will hear in a few minutes, this anniversary takes on special meaning with today's remarkable announcement.
This news conference is being live streamed on discoverfreedmen.org, and concurrent events are being held throughout the nation in 31 locations, most notably at the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where Dr. William Pretzer, genealogy specialist at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, is participating. The Underground Railroad Freedom Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio, the National Archives at Atlanta, Georgia, the Senator John Hines History Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Great Plains Black History Museum in Omaha, Nebraska, the Black History Museum of Richmond, Virginia, the Sue Cowan Williams Library in Little Rock, Arkansas, and at libraries, family history centers, and other locations in Candler, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, Oxnard, California, Sacramento, California, San Diego, California, Rancho Cucamonga, California, Wilmington, Delaware, Topeka, Kansas, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Buffalo, New York, Syracuse, New York, Charlotte, North Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Norman, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Charleston, South Carolina, Greenwood, South Carolina, Kingsport, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, Dallas, Texas, McKinney, Texas, and Salt Lake City, Utah.
Today, we acknowledge Elder D. Todd Christofferson, a senior leader from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who's here with us today. A special welcome is also extended to our partners, our leaders in the field of African American history and genealogy, who are so gracious to be with us today. Hollis Gentry, genealogy specialist at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Shauna Collier, head librarian for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Tamala Ten Penn Lewis, National President of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. Sherry Camp, Vice President of the Genealogy of Afro-American History and Genealogical Society. And George Davis, the Executive Director of the California African American Museum.
We're also pleased to have in attendance pillars of the African American community in California, representing education, civic, business, government, genealogical, religious, and media organizations.
Our program will proceed as follows. Elder D. Todd Christofferson will make an official announcement regarding African American history. Following his remarks, we will view a video about this unique project, its history, and importance. Tom Reed of Family Search International and Sherry Camp from the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society will then give us information on how to become involved in this project, both online and in collaboration with others throughout the nation. Elder Christofferson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by saying, in the wake of the tragic shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, Wednesday night. Our prayers are with the families of the victims and with the members of the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. We pray that all who mourn may find the peace that comes only from God. There, unfortunately, regrettably, we saw hate. Here today, we'll talk about love. 14 years ago, I stood at a similar podium in Salt Lake City, Utah, as I participated in another announcement concerning African American genealogy, the completed index of the Freedmen's bank records. Paul and Gay Cobb were there, along with a number of others who are also here today. The Freedmen's Bank was created to help newly freed former slaves with their new financial opportunities and responsibilities. In an effort to establish the identities of bank patrons, the bank's workers at the time recorded the names and family relationships of account holders, sometimes taking brief oral histories. Although the bank tragically collapsed because of mismanagement and fraud, the records it had provided a treasure trove of valuable family history information. I was then the executive director of the Family and Church History Department of our faith, and I witnessed the healing and joy that African Americans experienced as they discovered ancestors for the first time in those records. Today, I'm humbled once again to be part of a historic announcement that can, on paper, potentially reunite the Black family that was once torn apart by slavery. Happily, this time the records are 10 times greater, comprising an estimated 4 million names. And this time, the Black community is uniting to help create a wonderful tool with which to discover its own family. Let me tell you briefly about these records which take us back as a nation to the turbulent time at the conclusion of the Civil War. In 1865, newly freed men and women had a chance to unite their families, to create communities, and to participate in their own government. But they also faced immense obstacles, and so the federal government created the Freedmen's Bureau to facilitate their transition to citizenship. The Bureau helped reunite families. It opened schools to educate the illiterate. It managed hospitals, supervised labor contracts, rationed food and clothing, and even formalized marriages. In the process, the Bureau gathered priceless, handwritten personal information on African Americans. In total, the Bureau's records comprise over 1,100 rolls of microfilm with untold stories of African Americans immediately following emancipation. These are personal, sometimes difficult accounts to read from a turning point in our nation's history when our forebears were struggling with their own humanity. But what one also sees in these records is triumph and hope and resilience. What a great testimony to the sheer will and determination of this generation of people who had so little, yet rose to freedom and dignity. The Freedmen's Bureau records are the property of the National Archives and Records Administration, which has carefully preserved and protected them for the American people. We honor its commitment to the past. Family Search, a nonprofit organization sponsored by our faith, purchased copies of these records from the National Archives in order to index and publish them digitally. In addition, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is slated to open on the Washington Mall next year, 2016, is partnering with Family Search International to index the records and make this searchable database accessible online, as well as in the Family History Center that will be part of that new museum. Now, we're calling this the Freedmen's Bureau Project for a reason. Although the images of the records are now available on discoverfreedmen.org, they have not been indexed, meaning the key information, such as names, dates, places, have not been extracted and put in an index so that the records can be searched. Today, you're going to hear more about the project to index these records so that African Americans can find their families from the Civil War era, many for the first time in history. So why is our faith so involved in genealogy? One of our key beliefs is that our families can be linked forever, and that knowing the sacrifices, the joys, the paths that our ancestors trod helps us to know who we are and what we can accomplish. For over 100 years, Family Search and its predecessors have been actively gathering, preserving, and sharing genealogical records. Today, a dedicated team of employees and volunteers works tirelessly to preserve and share the largest collection of genealogical and historical records in the world for all of God's children. It's our hope that the Freedmen's Bureau records will be a valuable resource for African Americans and help link together families so long and tragically separated. I'd like now to show you a short video illustrating the Freedmen's Bureau Project and the significance of these records. Thank you.
Shortly after the Civil War ended, some 4 million slaves were set free, and they would not have had any place to stay, any place to sleep, or any food to eat had it not been for the concept of the Freedmen's Bureau.
It was a very scary thing for the freedmen at that time because there was no sense of protection.
They're working sometimes for the same person who had enslaved them, who was not excited about paying money to the same people whose labor he had had for free for decades. That was an adjustment, and that brought about the need for someone to intervene and to be a go-between between former slaveholder and those once enslaved.
The government felt that they needed to bring some order to this chaos, and in that process created the Freedmen's Bureau.
His primary mission was to assist the former slaves in making this transition from slavery to freedom.
It provided them an opportunity to get work permits, to find work, started schools called Freedmen Schools. What became even more important for us now was that they not only asked them their individual names, but they asked them questions about their background, who they had been slaves with, who their parents were, who their spouses were, who their children were, where they were born.
One could argue that the Freedmen's Bureau records are some of the most valuable records to study the African American family.
It makes a difference to know where you come from and who you come from, because when you know where you're coming from, then you can design where you are going.
I had a conversation with a friend and he said, black genealogy is not fun. You can't find anything. I'm a novice when it comes to family history research, but I've hit that wall, that time period where there's no documentation of your family anymore.
The African American community through slavery was split up, divided. Families were torn apart. We don't know who our family really is or from where we originated.
African Americans get back to 1870 and they can't go beyond that. So you'll hear a lot of African Americans say, the records don't exist because of slavery, or I can't find my family tree, or should I give up?
As African Americans, everything has been said, oh, there are no records. We don't have any history. We can't document anything. Well, it turns out that's not true.
The Freedmen's Bureau project is really designed to take records and actually make them searchable online for individuals trying to research African American family history in the United States.
There were well over 1 million documents in those records. So we're talking about a lot of material, a lot of stories, and if we don't digitize them and index them, nobody's gonna know.
We need to make these records available to everyone. We need everyone's help to make these records available to everyone because they will provide a window to identify your family in their records and to move back into that pre-1865 time period.
We have to go back to the past in order to understand the future. It helps us understand, why do I do what I do? Why do I act like this? Why do I feel this way?
Being able to say, I know where I came from. It's a sense of identity. It's looking at that ancestor and saying, look at them, they survived. It's because of what they did, I'm here today.
If they made it through, then I can too. My future can become bright. I don't have to be stuck in the past, but I need to know the past so that I can get through my future and make a better life for me.
Everything that we are is because of them. It is vitally important to know that you're here for a reason.
This is a chance for us to learn our story and then tell it to the world in a way that it has not been told before.
Those records that are not indexed can make that connection between a former slave and their master, which is the critical connection that African Americans need to do slave ancestral research.
To have this information on index where you could type in your ancestor's name and that name can come up and that document can come up, it means so much.
The project is to really solicit volunteers from around the country to help us actually transcribe these records and make them searchable so individuals like myself can find their own families in these records.
Why not participate in this project to make it easier for not only you, but future generations to find this information and really tell and create that story about their family history?
We're helping to rebuild or reconnect to our ancestors, so we all need help. And you can help and provide that help by getting involved with the project.
Get involved with this project. It's worth it. It's worth all the time and energy that it will take to get this project off the ground.
That was so inspiring to see, and that gives me a lot of hope. I want to say good morning to you all. We have so many distinguished guests and friends in the house. So happy to have all these partners with us. And on behalf of Family Search, I want to thank all of you and all of you across the country. I'd like to thank the Sullivans and Elder Christofferson for making this day a historic day in the African American community. Don't let the events of 2 days ago put a shadow on what we have done here today. We have announced and will now move forward with bringing to light the names and information for more than 4 million individuals. That is something to be proud of. I work for Family Search International, and as a marketing manager, I've collaborated with many individuals in the development of the materials and the communication regarding this monumental project. In doing so, it's been interesting because I felt the call from my own ancestors to find their information in these records. I began my own journey of discovery just a few months ago, but like many who have African American roots, I've hit that brick wall. I've been able to trace my Baines family line back to that 1870 US Census, but that's it. And I know my family goes back further than that. I just can't find the records and documentation yet. That's what we seek to accomplish with the Freedmen's Bureau project. It's kind of interesting, in seeking out my own family, I've learned that my wife and I aren't totally crazy because we have a family of 5 children, one of them who actually's birthday is today. My great-grandparents had 14 children, so I'm not that off base. My own personal journey of self-discovery has taught me more about myself than I really knew. And we all, as a group, those of us who are going to participate in this project and have so far, realize that if African Americans take the time to join in this effort, to discover these free men and women, they'll learn a little bit about themselves too. So we invite all to come along on this journey with us by visiting the project website, discoverfreedmen.org. That's discoverfreedmen.org. Here on this website, you'll see immediately how you can get involved with the project. You can learn more about the Freedmen's Bureau from what was shared in that video just a few minutes ago. You can click on a button to become a volunteer. By doing so, you determine what set of records you want to transcribe. You download our software, get a free account, and then begin indexing or transcribing these records. It's really a simple process to get involved. And while you're on discoverfreedmen.org, you can monitor the community's progress. Again, this isn't just us here in the California African American Museum. We've heard of these 31 different locations across the country. All of us are going to be doing this, and we can monitor that progress. We can see how much information from these records that are just now digital images are now becoming searchable. Our goal is to have all of these 1.5 million digital images indexed with that information freely available online in advance of the grand opening in 2016 of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. I personally, and we all are, thrilled at the prospect of having the Freedmen's Bureau records searchable and for research, and that's a significant part of the experience that will be for those who attend the museum once it opens. So if you need help getting started, on our website here, we provided an indexing guide to assist you. You can also get one-on-one help, which is amazing, one-on-one help at any one of our 1,864 family search centers across the United States. And in addition, this is what's really exciting, Family Search has partnered with the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society and their 30 chapters around the country where individuals can talk with someone specifically about African American family history and genealogical research. So with that, go ahead, clap, it's okay. So with that, I'd like to introduce my friend, Vice President of Genealogy for the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, Mrs. Sherry Camp.
Hello, America, and all of our guests here in the California African American Museum. What an exciting opportunity we have to bring one of the most important record sets to light. This is a chance to make history. Make history. We are part of making history. This will change the very fabric of genealogy for African Americans. The Freedmen's Bureau records, or the records of the records of the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands. I know I said that wrong, Angela. Or the record group, the 105, will give Americans a great opportunity to reach into the past and bring to the light the history of all time that has been dark for 150 years. We will now be able to research our own personal family histories and tell the history of our country in a way that is truly groundbreaking. As Vice President of Genealogy, I represent the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society Incorporated, which we call OGS, AAHGS, we call OGS lovingly. We are a national nonprofit organization founded in 1977 in Washington, D.C. by James Dent Walker. Mr. Walker worked for the National Archives for 30 years, specializing in military and African American records. His dedication and service to African American genealogy makes me proud to stand before you today, representing our organization. OGS, we lovingly call OGS, strives to preserve African American ancestor families and cultural diversity for teaching, research techniques, and disseminating information throughout the communities of our nation. Our primary goals are to promote scholarly research, provide resources for historical and genealogical studies, create a network of persons with similar interests, and assist members in documenting their families. OGS is the largest African American genealogical society that matches peers in genealogy to experts around the country. We do this in our local chapters. Each chapter meets monthly to aid genealogists and family historians with lectures, special guest speakers, local and genealogy projects, and various events. From DC to California, Minnesota to Texas, Kansas to Atlanta, Illinois and Virginia, and Massachusetts to Florida, and all places in between. I'm going to share with you, if I can find it, all of our states, all of our cities that have chapters. There's Little Rock, Arkansas, and I'm going to mess this up because, oh, here we go. Okay. I apologize. There's 32 chapters. Little Rock, Arkansas, Charlotte, South Carolina, Salt Lake City, Utah, Greensboro, North Carolina, New Jersey, New Jersey City, New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware, Richmond, Virginia, Nashville, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, Rockville, Maryland, Columbia, Maryland, Spring, Texas, which is in Houston, Wesley Chapel, Florida, Beverly, Massachusetts, Carbondale, Illinois, Baltimore, Maryland, Orlando, Florida, Palmyra, New York, Newport News, Virginia, Fort Washington, Maryland, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Fresno, California, Memphis, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, New York, Topeka, Kansas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And I think I didn't mention Washington, D.C.
And Salt Lake.
I had Salt Lake. It's on there. Okay. Our chapter presidents and national staff are dedicated to help further African American research so that we can collectively connect our families together. We do this through award-winning newsletters and journals and our annual national conference that we hold every October, which is designed actually to connect genealogists and their family researchers with information to help them further their research. New chapters are forming all the time where people get together and learn more about family history. With the Freedmen's Bureau Records Indexing Project, OGS members and friends in cities across this country accept the challenge to completely index this record set in 6 to 9 months. I have personally been researching my family since 1988. It's been a long and a hard and difficult journey. It is precisely for this reason that I dedicated my life to working to make the journey easier for others who are just getting started. My genealogy work is a labor of love for this cause. I learned genealogy at my church and worked as a family history consultant, helping others to learn to do their family history. I took a certificate course, I attended genealogy conferences, and joined genealogy societies like OGS. I am also a genealogy librarian at my local library in Topeka, Kansas. Hi, Topeka. I said all that to say that I know how important this record group is to the nation and to African Americans in particular. I have personally experienced grief at not finding my ancestors when the first wave of digitization came along and you could put your name in and out pops the information you're looking for. They just weren't there. I used to say, if there were any of my family members online, it's because I put them there. I did the research. Now I'll be able to say, there they are. Here is their story. Here's their history. Now that we're partnering with Family Search, we have the most awesome opportunity to make a difference in our communities. I am recruiting volunteers, and we are recruiting volunteers, my colleagues and I, in each of our chapter sites We are rallying all of our chapters across the nation to create national support to index the Freedmen's Bureau records. We are sure to meet the challenge to complete and index these records in a record time. Please join us. Find a local chapter in a city near you or start one. And you can find out how at www.aahgs.org. Thank you.
We recognize this type of an effort takes support from communities. In Los Angeles, 2 individuals who exemplify such service to the African American community and others are Ambassador and former U.S. Congresswoman Diane Watson and Jenna Scott, the Deputy Director of the Center of White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. We welcome them separately to the podium to briefly address us. Ambassador Watson.
First, I want to commend the Church of Latter-day Saints for recognizing we indeed have a past and a future. And I just want to add this. Every single human being on this globe came from the continent of Africa. Very quickly, I was aware of that going to UCLA. There was a Mormon temple across the street. And I decided to check out who I really was and where I came from. And that started me on my search. I went to London. I found the crest and the clan, and it said that the O'Neills was Scotch-Irish. Now look at me. And so I followed up on that, and I found that my grandmother's mother was the slave master's child. And my grandmother was learned. And Passaic County, Holly Springs, Mississippi, they came up to Chicago. She became a surgical nurse and operated on the first open heart surgery with Dr. Williams at Providence Hospital. My mother was born in Chicago. They moved across because they heard that you could have more education. Our family knew that the way out of servitude and slavery was to be learned. And my grandmother traveled in the Spanish-American War and as a surgical nurse, and she met the captain of the ship when she was looking for a pair of shoes that would fit her. She married him. His name was Rabouin. He was French. And the first daughter was born in Florida, my mother's oldest sister. And because she was very fair-skinned, she could not be educated in the black school, the white school. So she was sent to Tuskegee. And she married and she had 3 children. And my cousin, my age, first cousin's last name is Chase. Chase Manhattan Bank family. She got a full scholarship to go to Harvard. So I must say that I commend you. We need to know who we are. If we know where we come from, we have a clear way of going into the future. And thank you for digitalizing this information. And all my friends, relatives, and there are a lot of them out, and voters, I will say you can go and you can find in your local center who you are and where you came from. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. To Elder Christofferson and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and to the partners here on the platform for this phenomenal event, I greet you on behalf of President Obama and the White House Office for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Now, this morning, I am triply excited, not only about the release of this information for volunteers to be mobilized across the country to help index this project, but also in the introduction from, I believe it was President Sullivan who introduced me. Isn't his wife beautiful? He introduced me as Deputy Director of the White House, and I need to correct that because I'm actually an appointee of the President in one of the agencies. But I'm excited about the fact that he introduced me as being from Los Angeles, because although I work in Washington, D.C., my heart is truly here. So, as was said earlier, and as was reminded by the ambassador when we were back in the back praying about this event, our thoughts and prayers do go out to the families of those who were murdered in Charleston, South Carolina. But as I thought about coming here today, I thought about the juxtaposition of such tragic, heinous act that would have lives lost, juxtaposed against an act of love, where the church has purchased these records and will make them available free of charge to not only African Americans, but everyone on the globe who would have the wisdom and the insight to learn more about not just the history of African Americans, but about the history of this nation. And so I thank you, Elder Christofferson, and to the church for this act. But in my minute to speak, I also want to call upon some of my colleagues. Whether or not you are interested in indexing this effort, I think every single person in this room has a part to play. I look at my colleagues from the National Congress of Black Women, represented by President Judy Matthews, educating young people all over the country. These records will be able to be used to educate young people all over the country. I think about my colleagues who are here from the Black Ministers Alliance, Reverend Wade and Dr. Wade and Dr. Gaddis. And I'll just wait with great anticipation for the preached words that will come out of the deep stories that will be found in these records. I look at my colleague Karen Embry, who's here today, a documentarian, who may decide to use these records to document some of the rich lives and the resilience of African Americans, not just coming out of slavery, but what they came from, the royalty, the resilience, the inventiveness, the ability to hold on in the midst of difficult circumstances and then to propel forth to greatness. At this time, when we have the first African American president in the White House, that these records would be released. So when he goes on to his legacy, there will yet be a legacy for all of us that extends far beyond the 8 years that he's been able to grace us with his presence in the White House. So I ask you all to think about it in your hearts. How can you speak about it? How can you help pass this on? Maybe you won't do the volunteer indexing, but maybe you will just tell somebody about it. I think about the woman from Pepperdine who's here today, and she's just beautiful in that yellow suit. She was on the video. And the young people that are coming up through the colleges and universities who might just need an opportunity to do some research for academic credit. Now, I'm not saying that anybody's going to do that, but maybe some of our young people in the college, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, because this is rich, this is about all of us. I know the records are about the 4 million African Americans that were freed, but at that time, there were people from all races, all religions, all ethnicities who were heralding the call for a new America, an America that would hold the promise of us being a perfect union, an America that would hold the promise that all men are created equal. So I ask you to think about that today. Whatever you decide to do as a result of being here today, tell somebody. I'm certainly planning to go back and tell the people at the White House about this great event. This is a wonderful event. And I will share, President Sullivan, that I was actually promoted here too, so maybe they ought to do the same. Thank you.
Oh, this has been beautiful. My heart is so full. As I have listened to the words spoken today and the priceless information in these records, I can't help but think of our own three children, Jeremiah, who's 11, Abram, who is 9, and Corbin, who is 5. I want them to know the sacrifices and have an appreciation for those who overcame an unconscionable past, to give them the future they have today. In the end, it is all about family, and in the words of Reverend Cecil L. Murray, when you know where you are coming from, you can design where you are going.
Well, we close today's press conference with a celebration of music. Here to lead us in Lift Every Voice and Sing is Shoni Bennett. Shoni won the Golden Medal for Beverly Hills Hollywood NAACP Act So program. She will sing the first 2 verses and then will invite the audience to join in on the third. Thank you.
Has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought.